Let's launch right into it. So here's the question of the day. The Torah tells us that the forefathers and the matriarchs, all of them, the Avos and the Imois, they observed the entire Torah even before it was actually given. How's that possible? First of all, because they wanted to serve Hashem beyond what they were obligated to do, which I'll soon tell you in a moment. Fine, but how did they know all the mitzvahs? Torah precedes creation. God conceived of Torah before created the world even. And they were prophets, and they divined prophecy, these truths. Tefillin, Pesach, Shabbos, everything. They didn't observe it the way we do exactly. It was more in a symbolic, spiritual plane, but they observed all the mitzvahs. Whatever could be observed practically was observed practically. Now, this is something that a child, when you read Chumash, it's in the Torah itself, and the child knows this, that the forefathers observed all the mitzvahs that will be future given to the Jewish people, which raises the following very strong question. Before I ask the question, or just to remind you, because it's really on Rashi, because the Rashi's job it is to explain that story, the text to the intelligent reader, the theoretical 5-year-old child that has no preconceived knowledge other than everything he's learned till now, and he's straight and logical. What does it mean? So Rashi has to address every question. Just by the way, I think I told you in parenthesis, in this week's, they tell the story about the Ruzhiner, famous Hasidic Rebbe, Yisrael Ruzhiner. They say it happened with the Rebbe also. That with this week's Parsha, so we read that the angels go up and come down. So Rashi comments that the angels from Yaakov is leaving Israel, going now to Haran. So the angels that accompany Ben Israel are going up, back to heaven. New angels, diaspora angels, are coming down to accompany him. That's why he says goes up and come down, because angels first come down, then they go up. Why are they starting here? Because they were already with him. And so, you know the story. So the Rishon, as a child, would always ask the question that Rashi would comment. The teacher would say, good question. And Rashi, he always asked the question. When it came to this pasuk, the child's not asking anything. The teacher says, you don't have any difficulty? He says, no. So the teacher points it out. The angels are going up and then coming down. Should be the reverse. Angels start at heaven and come down, then they go up. To which the child replied, it was a dream. There's no questions on a dream. Afachol is concussion. But that's Rashi's job, is to answer every question. So what's the question? How could Yaakov marry sisters? It's a prohibition. Later in the Torah, in Sefer Vayikra, a man, at a time when a person could marry more than one wife, but you can't marry two sisters.
Quick question. So you mentioned the Avos followed all the mitzvahs. But let's say Abraham, if he did, which he did, so did they add to what Abraham knew, or did they learn it from Abraham?
We don't know exactly, but probably there were prophets on his level as well. So some people would have learned from him, but the Avos themselves would have seen it the same address that he saw it. There's a story with the B'zush of Anipola. B'zush of Anipola was one of the disciples of the Maggid and a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, talking the third generation. He wasn't renowned as the greatest scholar of all of them. Compared to us, he was. But I just detail the story, but the bottom line is that someone had a very strong question on the Rambam, something very contradictory, some question. Where did the Rambam get this from? And where's the source? And Rabbi Zusha said the source is in the Jerusalem Talmud in the line Takta such and such. So they looked at him with amazement, and no one knew the answer except he did. And you need a vast scholarship to know by heart a little line there tucked away in the Jerusalem Talmud, not the Babylonian Talmud. So they wondered, how did you know that? He said, I didn't know the quote in the Jerusalem Talmud. I just know where in heaven he saw it. That's where I saw it. I saw it with Rambam knew it from the Jerusalem Talmud, but mainly because that's how it's God's wisdom in heaven. That's how he knows it. And he said, I don't know it from the text. I know it from the source. I'll get the exact detail, but that's the Nakud of the story. So the question is, how then could Yaakov have married two sisters when they respected all the laws given in the future? And Rashi, who writes a commentary doesn't seem to answer the question. They might want to say like this, he doesn't answer it because the child doesn't know this yet. He hasn't learned it. Only when the reader will get to Vayikra, then you're going to learn. So that's not a satisfactory answer because he has to answer it then. When the kid gets to Vayikra, he's going to, Rebbe, how come Yaakov married two sisters? He doesn't answer, not here, not there. So it's got to be, therefore, so obvious and straightforward, there's no need to say anything. But why is it obvious? In fact, in the commentaries give the following answers. I'll give you three answers, and we'll see if we examine them, we have questions. It doesn't fit with the simple meaning of the pasuk. For example, the Ramban says that the forefathers only kept all mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, not when they lived outside Israel. And he explains why. Eretz Yisrael is the Holy Land, it's a higher level, and that's where they observed the mitzvahs. So therefore, where did he marry the four sisters? In Choron. This is deep in Iraq, when he spent 20 years with Lovat. It wasn't in Israel. That's permissible. So the Rebbe says it's a very nice answer, but it's not, doesn't seem to be born out of the text itself, because we're going to read next week when he meets Esav, he tells Esav, hints him, don't start up with me because I kept all the mitzvahs when I was with Lavan. Tayag mitzvah shamarti. He says, in Lavan garti, I dwell. The word garti is unusual because the numerical value is 613. He's telling it subtly, I got protection. So we see that even in Choron, and he says there, that's where I kept it. With our swindler uncle Lavan, I remained loyal and kept all 613. So you see clearly that even there he kept 613. How did he marry sisters? So that answer is not going to answer. Good answer. Another answer is, he has to father the 12 tribes. God told him to marry these girls, Rachel and Leah, and that would override his observance of anything if God, like Hashem told Avram to slaughter his son. The same God said, you're not allowed to kill, but if God says slaughter him, slaughter. It's a very nice answer, says the Rebbe, but nowhere do we read in the Torah that Hashem commanded him to marry. If you read the Torah, he saw Rachel, he felt smitten by her, whatever his reasons, he wanted to love her, then he worked 7 years. There's no commandment, so that answer is not satisfactory. So we need to answer our question. There's a third answer. Outside Israel, commandment. I forgot, there was a third answer the Mepharshim give. Also, upon scrutiny, we find wanting. So what's the explanation? The explanation is this. The forefathers keeping the mitzvahs is voluntary. They weren't commanded to. Their zealousness, they want to serve Hashem, they see the Torah, and they want to observe it. Also, there's another component to that. Everything we do, everything, they created the model for. Our forefathers created the model, so therefore they had to do the mitzvahs before it was even commanded, kind of already paved the way and empowered us to be able to do so. That's another component. However, it was a stringency, it's a chumrah, not commanded. Therefore, if it conflicts with an obligation that they do have of then and there, the obligation is paramount and would supersede any stringency in the future. Therefore, everybody knows, and this is also in the Chumash, that there were 7 laws given to humanity till before the giving of the Torah. It's called the 7 Noahide laws. 6 were given to Adam, and the 7th was given to Noach. By the way, I just got this in the mail. He sent me these packages of, you can give out to non-Jews. You want to take some? It's very beautifully written, the 7 Noahide laws. I'll read it to you. 1. First, this side says, God created the world and placed us in it. By embracing these 7 principles, we can cultivate a beautiful universal garden. Just to tell you, there's a chassid, his name is Shalom Ber Hecht. It's actually related to us. He's not well, and his children are doing all these things. He's son of J.J. Hecht, the famous J.J. Hecht, anyway. He said for the four Shleimer. He sent this to all the shluchim packages to give out. So what are the 7 laws? Just you should know. Number 1, that divine unity. I affirm the one creator, rejecting all false worship. These are 7 universal laws that we as Jews have to inspire non-Jews to observe. I think I told you the story once. I was in the ashram, and I'm sitting with these old Jewish kids. They went to the Jewish day schools also. And like, they're not kids, they're professionals and academics and in the university. And one of them said to me, it's why you're here, you're Jew. He says, because where's the universal message of, if the Torah is true, where's the universal for humanity? It's always us against them. That's the whole mindset. Whole Judaism was Holocaust, anti-Semitism. Here in Buddhism, it's universal, talking to the world. Where's the message? I said, no one told you about the 7 Noahide laws. No, of course not. And that was, they were missing. They were missing, light unto the nations, chosen people, chosen to be responsible to illuminate and inspire the world. If God created the whole world, what's our message to the world? They were never told this. Teachers didn't know. It wasn't part. The whole mindset is always, why be Jewish? Because they hate us and want to kill us and they gassed us. It worked for a while, maybe, but not anymore. It's got to be affirmative. What's our message to the world, etc. So here are the 7 principles. Say quickly. 1, God. 2, sacred speech. You can't curse God. I will speak respectfully about the Creator. 3, sanctity of life. I reject murder, valuing each life as an entire world. 4, marital fidelity. I will uphold marriage as a reflection of divine oneness. 5, I will not steal. 6, compassion. I will avoid needless harm to any living being. And 7, pursuit of justice. I support righteous courts and laws. These are the 7 principles. Correspond to the 7 midah. There's a whole big stuff. Now, they're all bound by these laws. In addition to that, Rashi told us that society then had voluntarily undertaken observance of additional laws that became the norm. For example, honoring parents. It's not one of the 7. But it was done even then, and we see this clearly in the Torah, because 2 things. In the Torah, we're told Yaakov is criticized and punished for the 22 years he was not at his father, serving him as a son. It wasn't his fault, etc. How was he punished? That Yosef was gone for the same amount of years, never had Yosef. So we see that honoring parents was something that was a norm for the day. Furthermore, we're told Avram, when he leaves Haran, his father was still alive. But the Torah says his father died, and then he left originally. And Rashi says why? Because it would look terrible that he left his aging father. So the Torah covers it up and says his father died and Avram left, teaching us that honoring parents was a norm of the day. Another thing that was a norm of the day is that after the flood, the Torah only, the 7 Noahide laws is adultery, marriage. But certain, which we call today incestual relationships, would be permission, not brother and sister, but closer relatives. Society then took upon themselves, they girded themselves in this area, realizing this brought upon the flood. That became the norm. And the 3rd thing is deceiving. You make a promise, you come through. Now, before I get to that, how this helps us, I just want to tell the important thing. I said before, a principle that the forefathers, in their zealousness to observe all laws, will not do so if it contradicts the 7 Noahide laws or something that everybody's now observing. Tzachil Hashem. Another proof of that is, if Avram kept all the laws, why didn't he circumcise himself before God told him? The answer is, one of the laws is he may not shed blood, murder, or shedding any blood needlessly. If he's not commanded just to operate and shed blood, is forbidden. Go to the 7 Noahide laws. That's why God had to command it. So we see that it's an important principle, that they cannot contradict their zealousness, what's in the future, cannot contradict an obligation now, which is why he didn't circumcise himself, because that would contradict shedding blood. And God told him it's different. And that's explicit, God told him. So I just told you now that one of the things that the people accepted voluntarily was you gave your word, you keep it. How do we know that? In this very story. Because when Lavan promises Yaakov Rachel, and the next morning, because she was veiled, etc., it's Leah. Yaakov comes with a complaint. Why did you deceive me? And what was Lavan's answer? Well, everybody does that. That's what we do. What are you asking me? He bends over backwards to justify and explain himself because she's the older one. We don't give. She was younger. We don't give the younger before the older. Even Lavan, the big swindler, is putting on this face that I'm an honest man, meaning I keep my word. I keep my word. So we see from the story, Rashi has the comments right to the story, that one of the principles of morality, even though it's not on the seven, that people are observing is you keep your word. We see from the story. Now we have our answer. Yaakov promised he's going to marry Rachel. He promised, committed. Then it turns out it's Leah. You committed, you got to. There's a future prohibition not to marry sisters that cannot contradict an obligation that I need to do now. That's a stringency that he's keeping observing. But that would contradict an obligation now which the society as a whole is observing, and he was championing monotheism, certainly must uphold, is you gave your word, you follow through. And that's the reason that he married sisters, to fulfill his current obligation to keep your word. Later, when it becomes a commandment, it wouldn't. Oh, I just remembered, by the way, another answer. One suggested answer is, because when you convert, they all presumably converted the girls. A convert is a newborn, and halachically not related. Halachically, if a brother and sister goyim convert, they can marry because they're not related. You don't do it because it doesn't look good, be misinterpreted, but it's permissible. So why could he marry two sisters and no longer considered sisters? It's a beautiful answer, but there's no concept of conversion before the Torah was given. We don't find such a thing. Conversion only happens with the giving of the Torah. So it's a nice answer, but it's not justified by the text. Now, the takeaway lesson. So what's our conclusion? Our answer in the end is, why did he marry? He was obligated to marry two sisters. Because for the simple reason that he gave his word, and that's something that society then was living by, and therefore becomes obligatory. What do we learn from here? A very important lesson that applies even to us today. A person may not put his own piety going beyond the law before his obligations to his fellow Jew. What you have to do, you have to do. But a person I'll tell you what I mean a little bit. I illustrate the story. I think I told you this. There's a fellow called Avi Pupko. Avi Pupko is a rabbi in Manhattan. He's a cousin. They're all Rabbi Pupko here. It's a famous rabbinic family. It goes back generations, and they're all related. My kids in Seattle, Rabbi Pupko has a twin sister. She's the principal of the day school, the Jewish day school in Seattle. Her husband is a very prominent, I forgot the name, very prominent Rav, very frum, really, Haredi, very wonderful people. And that school, by the way, which he's the principal, they allow my son-in-law and Banja live in Capitol Hill. They use it for the minyonim and the Shabbatonim. They give them use of the school. There's a very beautiful relationship between Chabad and all the other communities, and the Haredi communities, the Sephardi communities. It's very nice. So the Avi Pupko can go online. So he writes this blog. He writes like this, tells a story. It was after Rosh Hashanah. It was, I think, 2 years ago, I think it was. And basically he says like this. He was at a table. It could be it was his shul. I don't know. The Chazan was a Lubavitch in Geman from Crown Heights. He's a businessman. He came with his wife, I think, a few kids. And he's a nice voice, a few extra dollars, and he's a Chazan davening. So it comes after the meal, he's finishing, he's going, taking a shofar in hand with his kids blowing shofar, nearby hospital to Manhattan, maybe wherever he was going. So Avi Pupko writes this article. The heading was something like, why aren't we doing this? He said, didn't we go to the same cheder? The same cheder tells us that loving your fellow Jew is the great principle of Torah. The same cheder says that all Jews, all Jews are responsible for each other. Like, why are these guys doing it and not us? It doesn't answer the question. It's a challenge to the reader. So I'm using this as a model. So he didn't go, and most people are not going with a shofar in hand to the park, whatever it is. What are they doing? I mean, saying Tillim, I'm not sleeping, Rosh Hashanah. They're acts of piety over and above the law. So we learn from here, no. Your piety is very good, and you need to excel there, etc., but not at the expense of your obligation, and especially to your fellow Jew. That's the story here with Yaakov. He promised Rachel, he's the big tzaddik, he doesn't do anything the Torah will command in the future, including marrying sisters, completely suspended. Right now, I got an obligation to you. That comes first, before my stringency. So that's a powerful lesson in our obligations to our fellow Jew. We're not saying don't excel in piety. You need to do that. But should not come in. So by extension also, it means, I'm just adding this. This is me. This is not just my own little thing on this. Because I see this. It's a wonderful thing that people become, in marriages especially, when people become more observant than the other one. So what really gets the other one's goat is the piety. You don't have to do this. So we have to be very careful there. Very careful there. So obviously, if that takes away from obligation here, obviously it's not. But even when it doesn't, I'm a better husband, you see, I'm a better wife. Very often the wife is becoming from and the husband is not. It's more often than the other way. I see I'm becoming better wife. But still, the piety is what grates a bit because you want to do this. So there's certain legitimacy to that, to make sure that the piety does not become a thorn in alienation, but on the contrary, only brings us closer and closer together. Have a wonderful day. I'm Sudas Toivus.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi. Thank you very much.
Clear,
Thank
guys.
you, Rabbi.
Thanks,
Huh?
Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Shalom.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. By the way, the answer to Avi Pupko's question is the Rebbe. If you're plugged into the Rebbe, you're plugged into the heart of the Jewish people, like that pumps out and the brain, the head, then you feel that you're part of the Jewish people and you feel connected and responsible. If you live in isolation, you're just your own little finger, your own little isolated Jew, you're not going to feel that. So why does Chabad feel that, or anybody that wants to be? Because if you plug into the source of the Jewish people, the heartbeat, we're all one great spiritual body, then you feel connected and responsible. That's the answer. Being connected to the Rebbe, learning his teachings, that's what inspires this kind of living Judaism, living responsibility and oneness. All right, friends, have a wonderful day.